Chen watched his daughter stop breathing. Not literally, but emotionally, mentally. Sophie was 6 years old and hadn't spoken in 8 months, hadn't looked at him in 6, was disappearing into a place he couldn't reach. And the woman he'd hired 3 days ago, the nanny with no credentials and a community college degree, was doing something on the security camera that made no sense. She was just sitting there, on the floor. While his daughter rocked back and forth making sounds that ripped his heart out, the nanny wasn't touching her, wasn't talking, wasn't doing anything. David's finger hovered over his phone, ready to call, ready to fire her, ready to find nanny number 10. Then Sophie's hands dropped from her ears. The sounds stopped, and for the first time since her mother died, David saw his daughter's face relax. Because this woman knew something every expert he'd hired didn't. She knew how to speak his daughter's language. His name was David Chen, 42 years old, CEO of Chen Technologies, $3 billion, everything money could buy. Except the one thing that mattered. His daughter Sophie was 6 years old, severe autism, nonverbal, and she was disappearing. 8 months since his wife Michelle died, car accident, drunk driver. Michelle was the only person who knew how to reach Sophie, knew the routines, the triggers, the communication techniques. Without her, Sophie had retreated completely, stopped using the few words she'd been able to say, stopped making eye contact even with David, stopped eating most foods, lost 12 pounds, had meltdowns 4 times a day, screaming, hitting herself, breaking things. David had hired 9 nannies in 7 months. 9. They all quit, scared, overwhelmed, didn't understand autism. He'd paid for the best therapists, the most expensive specialists. Nothing worked. Sophie was slipping away, and David was failing her completely. This was the stakes, not money, not business, his daughter's life, her ability to function, to connect, to exist in the world. If he didn't find help soon, Sophie would be lost, institutionalized, maybe, unable to live independently ever. That's what the last therapist had said, gently, carefully, but clear. Without intervention, Sophie's prognosis was poor. David had 2 choices: find someone who could reach her, or watch his daughter disappear completely. That's why Clara mattered. Why these cameras mattered. Why every moment counted. Because time was running out. Since then, Sophie had gotten worse, much worse. David tried. He hired the best therapists in San Francisco, the most expensive specialists, tried every approach they recommended, but Sophie retreated further. Stopped using the few words she'd been able to say. Stopped making eye contact even with him. Stopped eating most foods. Lost weight. Had meltdowns constantly, sometimes 4 or 5 times a day, screaming, hitting herself, breaking things. David didn't know what to do. He was good at running companies, at making decisions, at solving problems with money and strategy. But he couldn't solve this. He couldn't bring his wife back, couldn't make his daughter normal, couldn't fix what was broken. He hired nannies. They lasted a week, maybe 2. Sophie's meltdowns scared them. Or they didn't understand autism. Or they tried to force Sophie to behave like other kids. Or they quit because it was too hard. He went through 9 nannies in 7 months. 9. Then Clara Martinez applied. 28 years old. Resume wasn't impressive. Community college, no fancy credentials, references from families in the East Bay, nothing special. But when David interviewed her, she asked questions nobody else had asked. What are Sophie's triggers? What calms her? What does her schedule look like? What foods will she eat? Does she have any comfort objects? David answered everything. Clara listened, took notes. Then she said something that caught his attention. My younger brother is autistic, severe, like Sophie, nonverbal. I helped raise him. I know this isn't easy, but I also know it's possible. David hired her on the spot. That was 3 days ago. and now he was watching the cameras he'd installed in every room of his house. He'd told Clara about them. She'd said she understood. No problem. She had nothing to hide. So he watched, because he couldn't be home during the day, couldn't leave work. The company was in the middle of a major product launch, critical meetings, board presentations. He had responsibilities, but he also had a daughter who needed him, so he watched the cameras. If you're watching this, leave a comment with your city. The first day, Clara arrived at 7 a.m. David had already left for work. His assistant had let Clara in, given her the schedule, the emergency contacts, the list of Sophie's routines. Clara read everything. Then she went to Sophie's room. Sophie was in bed, covers pulled over her head, hiding. Clara didn't force her out, didn't turn on the lights, didn't open the curtains, just sat on the floor near the bed, said good morning quietly, then stayed silent. David watched on his phone from his office, watched Clara just sit there for 20 minutes, not moving, not talking, just being present. Finally, Sophie peeked out from under the covers, looked at Clara. Clara smiled, didn't move toward her, just smiled. Sophie pulled the covers back over her head. 5 more minutes passed. Sophie peeked out again. This time she stayed out, looked at Clara. Clara said, "Good morning, Sophie. I'm Clara. I'm going to be here with you. Is that okay?" Sophie didn't respond, but she didn't hide again either. By the end of that first day, Clara had gotten Sophie to eat breakfast. Not much, half a banana, some crackers, but more than Sophie had eaten in days. She'd gotten Sophie dressed, taken her to the living room, let Sophie line up her toy cars in exact rows. A routine Sophie needed. Clara didn't try to play with her, didn't try to change the routine, just sat nearby, available but not intrusive. David watched all of it, felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Maybe this nanny would be different. Maybe this one would last. The second day, Sophie had a meltdown. Morning routine changed slightly. Construction noise outside. Loud. Unexpected. Sophie started screaming. Threw her toys. Hit herself in the head with her fists. David watched the camera feed. Felt his stomach drop. This was it. Clara would quit, like all the others. But Clara didn't panic. Didn't try to grab Sophie. Didn't yell. She cleared the space around Sophie. Moved anything Sophie could hurt herself with. Then she sat down, started humming. That same pattern. Low notes. Steady rhythm. Sophie screamed for 10 more minutes. Clara kept humming. Never stopped. Never showed frustration. Just hummed. Eventually, Sophie's screams turned to crying. The crying got quieter. Clara was still humming. Sophie looked at her. Clara kept humming. Sophie crawled over, sat next to Clara, not touching, just near. Clara kept humming. 5 more minutes. Sophie leaned against Clara's shoulder, still crying but quieter. Clara wrapped one arm around her gently. Sophie didn't pull away. They sat like that for 20 minutes. David watched from his office with tears in his eyes, and in that moment, he understood something that changed everything. His daughter wasn't broken. She'd never been broken. She was just speaking a language nobody had bothered to learn. Until now. The third day was when he saw what Clara did with the pattern cards. Sophie couldn't talk, but Clara had brought laminated cards, pictures, simple drawings, apple for hungry, bed for tired, toilet for bathroom, hands covering ears for too loud. She showed Sophie the cards, explained each one, then left them on the table. Throughout the day, when Sophie got frustrated, Clara would point to the cards. "Can you show me?" Sophie started using them, pointing to the card for hungry, the card for too loud, the card for scared. It wasn't speech, but it was communication. More than Sophie had managed in months. David couldn't believe what he was seeing. This woman with no fancy credentials was doing what 9 other nannies and 5 expensive therapists hadn't been able to do. She was reaching his daughter. That night, David came home at 7 p.m., earlier than usual. He wanted to talk to Clara. She was in the kitchen, cleaning up from Sophie's dinner. Sophie was in the living room lining up cars, her comfort activity. David walked in. "Clara, can we talk?" "Of course." They sat at the kitchen table. David looked at her. "How are you doing this?" Clara looked surprised. "Doing what?" "Reaching her. Sophie hasn't been this calm in months. She hasn't communicated at all since my wife died. But you've been here 3 days and she's already using those cards. She let you hold her during a meltdown. How?" Clara was quiet for a moment. "My brother Diego is 25 now. When he was Sophie's age, he was exactly like her. Nonverbal, meltdowns constantly. My parents didn't know what to do. We lived in a small town in New Mexico. No specialists, no resources. So my mom and I figured it out ourselves. Learned everything we could. Tried everything. Some things worked, most things didn't. But we learned that the key is understanding that his brain works differently. Not wrong, just different. He needs things other people don't need. Routine, predictability, low stimulation. And he needs people who don't try to force him to be someone he's not." She paused. "Sophie isn't broken, Mr. Chen. She just needs someone who speaks her language. And I spent 20 years learning that language with my brother." David felt something in his chest. Relief, gratitude. This woman understood. Really understood. "What does your brother do now?" "He works at a library, shelving books. It's perfect for him. Quiet, structured, predictable. He lives with my parents still, but he's happy. That's what matters." David nodded. Felt tears again. "My wife knew how to help Sophie. I don't. I've tried everything, hired everyone, spent so much money, but nothing worked." "Because you can't buy your way through this," Clara said gently. "Autism isn't something money fixes. It's something patience and understanding and consistency help with. Sophie knows her world changed. She lost her mom, her safe person. She's scared. She doesn't know how to tell you that. So she shuts down, screams, breaks things. But those are all ways of communicating. We just have to learn what she's saying." David looked at her. "Will you teach me?" Clara smiled. "That's why I'm here." Over the next 2 weeks, David watched the cameras less. Not because he didn't care, but because he trusted Clara, and because watching made him realize how much he didn't understand his own daughter. Clara taught him. In the evenings after work, she'd explain what happened during the day. Why Sophie had a meltdown at 2 p.m., too much sunlight through the window. Change the light pattern on the floor. Sophie needs consistency. Why Sophie wouldn't eat the chicken he'd bought. Wrong texture. Too chewy. Sophie needs foods that are soft or crunchy. Nothing in between. Why Sophie lined up her cars every day. It wasn't obsessive behavior. It was regulating behavior. When the world feels chaotic, she creates order. It calms her brain. David started learning Sophie's language. Started understanding that when she covered her ears, it meant sounds were too loud. When she flapped her hands, it meant she was excited or overwhelmed. When she hummed, it meant she was self-soothing. He learned to lower his voice, to move slower, to give her warning before changes, to respect her needs instead of fighting them. One night, 3 weeks after Clara started, David came home early. 5 p.m. Clara was surprised to see him. "Everything okay?" "I left early. Wanted to spend time with Sophie." Clara smiled. "She's in her room, playing with blocks." David went to Sophie's room. Knocked gently. Waited. Opened the door slowly. Sophie looked up. Saw him. Went back to her blocks. David sat on the floor. Not too close. Just nearby. Watched her stack the blocks in careful patterns. Colors organized. Heights perfect. "Those look great, Sophie." She didn't respond. Kept stacking. David didn't push. Just sat. 5 minutes passed. Sophie finished her tower. Looked at it. then looked at David, pointed at the tower. David smiled. You built that. It's beautiful. Sophie's hand moved to the picture cards Clara had left on the table. She picked up one, showed it to David, the card for good. David felt his throat tighten. Yes, honey. It's very good. You did a great job. Sophie almost smiled. Almost. Then went back to her blocks. But something had shifted. She'd communicated with him, shown him her work, wanted his approval. It was small, so small. But it was everything. 2 months after Clara started, Sophie began eating better, sleeping better, having fewer meltdowns. She still wasn't talking, but she was using the picture cards constantly, communicating her needs, and sometimes she'd look at David or Clara and make eye contact. Brief, but real. David's work suffered. He started leaving early, coming in late, missing meetings. His COO pulled him aside. David, is everything okay? My daughter is getting better. Finally, after 8 months of hell, she's getting better. So no, I can't stay until 8 p.m. anymore. I need to be home. His COO looked at him. Understood. Do what you need to do. David realized something. His company would survive without him being there 16 hours a day, but his daughter wouldn't. She needed him. And for the first time since Michelle died, he could actually help her. Because Clara had taught him how, 3 months in, David came home one evening and heard something that stopped him in his tracks. Singing. Clara was in Sophie's room singing a children's song, and Sophie was humming along, not words, but matching the melody, participating. David stood in the hallway, listened, felt tears running down his face. Clara saw him, smiled, kept singing. Sophie kept humming. After the song ended, Clara said, Mr. Chen is home, Sophie. Should we show him what we practiced today? Sophie looked at David, then back at Clara. Clara held up a picture card, the one that meant yes. Sophie took it, held it up, showed David. Yes. Clara pulled out a small whiteboard. She'd drawn a simple face, smiling face. She pointed to it. Sophie, can you show me happy? Sophie looked at the drawing, then looked at her own face in the mirror across the room, touched her own cheeks, smiled slightly, pointed to the drawing. Good, Clara said. That's happy. Can you show me what you did today that made you happy? Sophie picked up a toy car. Her favorite, red. She'd had it since she was 3, showed it to Clara. Clara nodded. You played with your car. That made you happy. Can you show Daddy? Sophie turned, held up the car, looked at David. David crouched down. That's a great car, Sophie. I'm so glad it makes you happy. Sophie looked at him, really looked at him, made eye contact for 3 full seconds, then went back to Clara. But David stood there feeling like he'd won the lottery. 4 months in, the product launch at Chen Technologies failed spectacularly. A critical flaw in the semiconductor design. Production halted. Partners threatening lawsuits. Stock price dropped 20% in 1 day. The board called an emergency meeting. Wanted answers. David sat in the boardroom listening to executives panic, talk about damage control, about his failure as CEO, about whether he should step down. He listened. Then he said, I'll fix this. I'll take responsibility, but I'm not stepping down, and I'm not working 80-hour weeks anymore. My daughter needs me. That's not negotiable. One board member scoffed. Your daughter? The company is imploding and you're worried about your daughter. David looked at him. My daughter has severe autism. 4 months ago, she couldn't communicate at all. She screamed for hours, hurt herself, was losing weight because she wouldn't eat. I was failing her completely. But I found someone who knew how to help. And slowly, day by day, my daughter is coming back. She looks at me now. She communicates. She smiles sometimes. So yes, I'm worried about my daughter because she matters more than this company, more than the stock price, more than any of this. The room was silent. Finally, the board chair spoke. Fix the product, save the company, but do it on your terms. We can accommodate family needs. David did fix it. Worked with his engineering team to identify the flaw, redesigned the chip, negotiated with partners, offered refunds and future discounts, took the financial hit personally. The company survived, barely, but it survived. And David was home by 6 p.m. every day, every single day, because Sophie was waiting, and Clara was teaching him more than how to help his daughter. She was teaching him what mattered. One evening, 6 months after Clara started, David asked her to stay for dinner. She usually left at 6, but he wanted to talk. They sat at the kitchen table. Sophie was in the living room with her cars. Clara, I need to tell you something. Okay. You saved my daughter's life. You know that, right? She was disappearing. After Michelle died, Sophie just retreated into herself. And I couldn't reach her. I tried everything. But you did in weeks what I couldn't do in months. Clara shook her head. I didn't save her, Mr. Chen. I just knew what she needed, because I've been there. With Diego, I know what it's like to love someone who experiences the world differently. It's hard, but it's also beautiful. Once you learn to see things the way they see them. David was quiet. I want to do something for you. You don't need to. No, I do. You've given my daughter her life back. Let me help you. Whatever you need. Do you want to go back to school? I'll pay for it. Want a car? A house? Name it. Clara smiled. Mr. Chen, I don't need anything. I have a job I love. An apartment that's fine. My family is healthy. I'm good. But you could have more. More isn't always better. I have enough. That's more than most people can say. David looked at her, realized she meant it. This woman who'd changed his life wanted nothing in return, wasn't angling for money, wasn't leveraging Sophie's progress into a bigger paycheck. She was just doing her job because she cared. At least let me give you a raise. You already pay me very well. Not enough. Mr. Chen, seriously, I'm fine. Clara, please, let me do something. She thought about it. Okay, one thing. There's a non-profit in Oakland that helps low-income families with autistic kids. They need funding. If you want to help someone, help them. Donate in Michelle's name. David felt his eyes burn. I'll do that, and I'm still giving you a raise. Clara laughed. Fine, but only because I think you'll keep arguing if I say no. I will. They both smiled. Then David said, Can I ask you something personal? Sure. Why do you do this? Work with autistic kids? You could do other things. Easier things. Less stressful. Clara looked toward the living room where Sophie was humming to herself. Because when Diego was 6, we couldn't find anyone who understood him. Everyone wanted to fix him, change him, make him normal. Nobody accepted him as he was. It broke my mom's heart. It broke mine, too. So, when I got older, I decided I'd be the person we needed back then. The person who understands, who accepts, who helps without trying to change who they are. Diego taught me that different isn't broken. It's just different. And Sophie is teaching you the same thing. 8 months after Clara started, Sophie said her first word since Michelle died. David was reading to her before bed. A picture book about trains. Sophie loved trains. He turned the page, showed her a picture of a red train. Sophie looked at it, touched the page, then said, Clear as day, red. David froze. Sophie, did you just say red? She looked at him, said it again. Red? David's hands shook. Yes, honey. That's red. Can you say it again? Red! He pulled her into a hug. She let him. Didn't pull away. He was crying. She was calm. Just let him hold her. The next morning, he told Clara. She smiled. Said she'd been waiting for this. Said Sophie had been practicing with her, trying to form words. It was hard for her, but she was trying. Over the next few weeks, Sophie added more words. Blue, car, eat, no, yes, mama. That last one broke David's heart. She'd point to pictures of Michelle, say mama. He'd nod, say yes, that's mama. She's watching over you. Sophie would look at the picture, then go back to her cars. But she'd said it, remembered. That mattered. 10 months after Clara started, David was offered a massive acquisition deal. Another tech company wanted to buy Chen Technologies. The offer was insane, $5 billion. David would walk away with enough money to never work again, to do whatever he wanted. He thought about it for a week, then turned it down. His board was furious. Are you insane? This is generational wealth. I already have enough money, David said. And if I sell, the new owners will gut the company, fire half the staff, move production overseas. I built this company. These people depend on it. I'm not selling. But the money, I don't need more money. I need purpose. I need to keep building something that matters. And I need a schedule that lets me be home by 6 p.m. because my daughter needs me. The board chair looked at him. You've changed. Yes, I have. Turns out almost losing your daughter teaches you what actually matters. The acquisition fell through. Chen Technologies remained independent. David remained CEO, but he was different. Left work at 5 p.m., never scheduled meetings before 9 a.m., spent evenings with Sophie, weekends too, took her to occupational therapy, speech therapy, but also to the park, to the aquarium, to places Michelle had taken her. Slowly, carefully, building a relationship with his daughter that he'd never really had before. 1 year after Clara started, David came home and found Sophie sitting at the kitchen table with paper and crayons, drawing. Clara was next to her. Sophie saw David, held up her drawing. It was a picture of 3 people, stick figures, one tall, one medium, one small. She pointed to the tall one. Daddy pointed to the medium one. Clara pointed to the small one. Sophie. David crouched down. That's a beautiful picture, honey. Are those the 3 of us? Sophie nodded. Family. David's breath caught. Yes, sweetie, we're family. Sophie smiled, not just a little, a real smile. And she looked right at him, maintained eye contact. Love you, Daddy. David lost it, started crying, pulled Sophie into a hug. She hugged him back, squeezed him, said it again. Love you. He looked at Clara over Sophie's head. Clara was crying, too. Later that evening, after Sophie was in bed, David and Clara sat in the living room. She called us family, David said. All 3 of us. I know. She's never done that before, never grouped people like that, never used the word love. She's growing, learning, healing. David looked at Clara. I need to tell you something. I don't know how to say this without sounding weird. Just say it. You saved my life too. Not just Sophie's. Mine. When Michelle died, I was drowning. Couldn't handle work and Sophie. Was failing at both. You came in and didn't just help Sophie. You taught me how to be her father, how to see her, how to love her the way she needs to be loved. I'll never be able to repay that. Clara's eyes were wet. You don't need to repay anything, Mr. Chen. This is my job, but it's also my calling. Watching Sophie grow, watching you learn to understand her. That's the reward. I want you to know something. You'll always have a place in this house, in our lives, as long as you want. I'm not going anywhere. Good. Because I think Sophie would be lost without you. And honestly, so would I. They sat quietly. Then Clara said, You know what Michelle would say if she could see you now? What? She'd say you finally figured it out, that Sophie doesn't need you to fix her. She needs you to see her, and you do now. You really do. David nodded. Couldn't speak. Later that night, he pulled up the security camera footage from a year ago. The first day Clara had worked. Watched Sophie hiding under the covers. Watched Clara sit patiently on the floor. Watched the slow, careful way Clara had approached his daughter. Then he pulled up today's footage. Watched Sophie at the kitchen table drawing, smiling, saying, "I love you." The difference was staggering. Sophie wasn't cured. Autism doesn't work that way. She still had meltdowns sometimes, still needed routine, still struggled with things other kids found easy. But she was communicating, connecting, growing, living. And David was there to see it, every day, every moment. Because Clara had taught him that being present mattered more than being perfect. That understanding mattered more than fixing. That love came in different forms, and you had to learn your child's language to speak it correctly. He closed his laptop. Went to check on Sophie one more time before bed. She was sleeping peacefully, holding her red car. The one she'd been holding the first time she'd shown him she was happy. He kissed her forehead, whispered, "I love you, Sophie, exactly as you are." And for the first time since Michelle died, he believed it, believed that they would be okay. All three of them. Because sometimes the person you need isn't the one with the most credentials or the highest price tag. Sometimes it's the person who understands, who cares, who sees your child not as broken but as beautifully different, and who teaches you to see that too. Sophie was going to be okay, and so was he. What would you have done? Trusted someone with no fancy credentials, or kept searching for the perfect expert? Leave a comment. And if this story reminded you that love and understanding matter more than credentials, consider subscribing. Because everyone deserves to be seen, to be understood, to be loved exactly as they are. And sometimes the most extraordinary help comes from the most unexpected places.